I'm almost 33 years old and I've never been in a relationship. My name's Hannah and I am asexual, or more specifically, I am demisexual. And in this video today, where I get a little bit more vulnerable about my personal story and experiences, I'm going to share with you what demisexuality is, signs that you may be demisexual or that someone you know may be demisexual, how I discovered that I was demisexual, and then what not to say to a demisexual person. This may be a very long video, just a warning, because it is my intention for Pride Day to discuss this topic from all angles. So you can trust that by the time you finish watching this video, you're going to have a very clear understanding of just what demisexuality is and whether or not you might be demisexual or someone you know is demisexual. So this is going to be useful for people who already identify as demisexual or on the asexual spectrum. It's also going to be useful for people who may be questioning, still kind of unsure if they're demisexual. And then finally, even if you know you're not demisexual, you're not on the asexual spectrum at all, it can still be useful for you to better connect with people in your life who might be, because actually demisexuality and asexuality isn't as uncommon as we are led to believe. And especially if you're the type that's like watching my videos and resonating with my content, it is highly likely that you or someone in your immediate reality is asexual to a degree. So why am I talking about this? This is not something I typically talk about on my channel. So one, it's Pride Day and I wanted to celebrate in style, and a big shout out to all of my queer family out there. Two, I did a pretty in-depth blog post about demisexuality over 5 years ago now, and I wanted to kind of update it and in video form and kind of go into how I have evolved since I did that original blog post. So three, I want to help others who may be feeling kind of isolated or confused about their sexuality, or as I say, lack thereof, to feel less alone on this journey and to just spread the word about demisexuality and asexuality, and to validate that yes, this is a valid, real sexuality, because probably if you, like me, identify on the asexual spectrum, you have been gaslit basically your whole life that your sexuality doesn't actually exist, that it doesn't matter. And then finally, this is actually the thing that most excites me as the spiritual scientist that I am. So I recently did this video, which you can check out up here, on the link between autism and starseeds. And it is my belief, again, from just personal experience and observation, that there may also be a link between autism, starseeds, and asexuality, or being somewhere on the asexual spectrum. And if that is a topic that interests you, please let me know in the comments, and I will make a note to do a video on that, because yeah, it's something that I've kind of been mulling over for a while now, and I've noticed a clear correlation. So what exactly is demisexuality? So I'm just going to preface before I go deep into all of this. I am just speaking from my personal experience as someone who identifies as asexual and demisexual. It's going to vary from person to person. Not all demisexuals are alike. Not all demisexuals are going to share my opinions. So if you or someone in your life is demi, I would ask you to kind of check in with yourself or with that person on what is true for them. All of that being said, demisexuality also could be considered gray asexuality or gray ace. So this means that you're kind of more on the asexual spectrum. So for those of you who don't know, in the asexual community, we are aware of this spectrum. So there's allosexual here. These are hypersexualized people over here. And then totally asexual on the other end, which means there's no interest in sex whatsoever. Okay. Demisexuality is like somewhere in between. It could be anywhere. It could be pretty close to here or pretty close to here. But it's just somewhere kind of in between, which is why it also gets the name of gray asexual. But typically it means that you're kind of more towards the asexual side than the allosexual side. And I can tell you that is my personal experience. Is I usually just like to take the label asexual because for me as a demisexual, it's just so rare to have attraction. It's just easier for all parties involved if I'm just like, yeah, I'm just ace. I'm fully asexual. But I am technically demisexual. So boiling demisexuality down, it's basically like you only have sexual attraction to someone if there is first a very strong emotional connection or emotional attraction. A bond basically has to be formed to some degree before sexual attraction is even a possibility. And as a result, it can be really rare for demisexual people, such as myself, to develop sexual attraction to people. Honestly, I can count on a single hand at this age, like the people that I might be sexually attracted to. I don't even have really anyone who I'm like, yeah, definitely, like I want sex with that person. Like, yeah, I'm so sexually attracted. I honestly have like just a few people that I'm like, I might consider it. I might be open to it. Okay. And that's been over my entire life. And of course, this is going to vary from asexual, demisexual person to demisexual person, but that's my experience. So within the demisexual or asexual umbrella, there are different terminologies that can be applied to how a person feels about sex, because guess what? It can actually really vary. And this really surprised me when I was first learning about asexuality and demisexuality. So you could say there's kind of 3 different labels perhaps, but of course it's always really a spectrum. But kind of the 3 labels that I'm kind of remembering are sex indifferent, sex repulsed, and let's just say sexual or open to sex. I don't know if there's a specific label for that one, but it's someone that likes sex but still identifies as demisexual or asexual. Sex indifferent, as it implies, is like someone who really doesn't care either way about sex, like they're cool if they have it, they're cool if they don't have it, it's not very important. Sex repulsed, which is what I actually used to be, is someone who finds sex to be repulsive, as the name describes. Like, it's absolutely disgusting. The idea of sex is disgusting and repulsive to them. And this, honestly, I feel there can be many roots for this. I can say from my story, I think part of it comes from sexual trauma, to be honest. But again, not every sexually repulsed person is going to have sexual trauma. Also, I think it has something to do with being a starseed, because as starseeds, we kind of find humans gross sometimes. We find humans repulsive. And so the idea of having sex with a human is like nasty, even though we're humans right now. Those are just kind of my views when I sat with my own sex repulsion of like, why is this act so disgusting and repulsive to me personally? And those were the 2 things that I came up with. And of course, it is also very possible for a demisexual or asexual person to enjoy sex and to like it. And I imagine that I will eventually evolve into that. So I evolved, I would say, from a sexually repulsed person to sex indifferent, and perhaps someday I will become someone who likes sex. Who knows? It fluctuates, it changes. We're always discovering new things about ourselves. So I would encourage you, if you're also just like, I don't know which label to identify with, like, just keep an open mind. What feels most resonant for you right now in this moment? It's totally cool if it evolves or it changes. So on that note, I will just say, side little story is I'm super proud of myself for kind of evolving past the sex repulsion thing. Basically, what I did was very, very intensive shadow work, shall we say,
shortly after I met my twin flame a few years ago. And I will post a video on twin flames up here if you've never heard that topic or you've never heard me talk about my twin flame. But yeah, that kind of sparked me to do serious shadow work around my sexual trauma. And after I had done that, over a period of like 6 weeks, I was no longer sexually repulsed. It was quite miraculous, to be honest. So if this is something that you may be struggling with as well, something you would like to address and you want to know more about, let me know in the comments. Again, I'm totally open to make like an in-depth video on that topic, but I want to make sure this is something people actually want to hear and will listen to, because it's not something that's necessarily easy to talk about. It's not something people, I feel, typically put out on the internet. So if you let me know that you're interested, I will definitely do that for you, my friend. So how did Hannah discover that she was demisexual? Well, I can tell you, my whole life, it just felt like something was off with me sexually. I could never quite pinpoint it though. I was like, I'm not a lesbian. I was like, I know I like dudes. So I learned later on that I technically am pansexual, but as I always say, my asexuality takes precedence over that for me. I feel like it hardly matters that I'm pansexual because I'm just so asexual. It's just so rare for me to have any sort of attraction. But basically, my whole life, I felt something was off, and I always had a resistance to dating, and just didn't even get like crushes on people. Like I would see my peers like freaking out over, that the cute guy in class or that celebrity like Leonardo DiCaprio. I know that was a big one back in the day. And I just didn't get it. I was just like, I don't feel anything. I don't know like what this is. And honestly, because I was so brainwashed in Christianity back then, I went to Catholic school, but I wasn't Catholic. I just felt like I was a good little Catholic schoolgirl. Like, we were kind of brainwashed that sex is bad and that you should kind of save your virginity. You want to be abstinent and stuff. So I just always thought, I'm just being a good little Catholic schoolgirl. But deep down, I knew there was something more to it. Deep down, I knew that it wasn't like a choice. It was easy for me to be abstinent and actually very convenient for me to just take that on as a label, because deep down, there really wasn't a desire to have sex at all or to be romantic with anyone at all. And so I kept telling myself, I was like, okay, when I'm 13, I'll be interested in dating, and then I'll have a boyfriend, and then I will be a normal girl, real girl. Then I would turn 13. I was like, no way, that's gross, ew. And then I was like, okay, when I'm 16, when I drive, because it's stupid to me that kids are dating and they can't even drive themselves to the date. Like they're having mommy and daddy take them to the date. That just seems weird to me. So I was like, when I'm 16 and I can drive myself, then I'm going to be interested in a romantic partner. And then I turned 16, and again, I'm just like, ew, no, no thank you, no interest whatsoever, please and thank you. And basically this went on. And actually when I was in high school, a funny story, I came home and I saw that my mom had been Googling like how to tell if her daughter is a lesbian, because clearly my mom saw that there was something off here, and she was just like, is my daughter a lesbian? But yeah, that's kind of how it was for me growing up, just like feeling out of place, just feeling weird about the topic of sexuality, feeling like I just didn't belong, because like literally every song of all time ever, like every movie, everything was all about like romance and sex and stuff like this, and I just didn't care. Okay, I just did not care. I was like, there's a million other things I would rather be doing with my time. So I reach the age of 25 and I am on this website Loner Wolf. I'll give them a shout out. It's a really great website for spiritual development. And they don't typically write articles about sexuality, but they had written an article about demisexuality. And the moment I saw the word, my claircognizance kicked in like this. And I was just like, holy shit, that's what I am. That's my sexuality. I'm demisexual. I didn't even know exactly what that word meant, mind you, at that time, but I just knew the moment I saw it, it clicked. I was like, that's what I am. Finally, there is language to describe this feeling of offness I've always had around sexuality. And so sure enough, I like took the quiz, I read their article and stuff, and that was me. It described me to a T, and I have like used that label ever since. And just, I guess, a flash forward, I'll be addressing this towards the end of the video a little bit more, but I thought at that time, I was like, oh, I have a label for what I am. This is gonna be so easy now, just as someone might tell someone else that they're gay, that they're a lesbian, you know, I can just tell people now I'm demisexual, and they'll understand, right? They're gonna like let me off the hook, right? Wrong. Discovering that you're demisexual is just the beginning of this journey, and I'll get to some of the obstacles that we face in telling people that we're demisexual or asexual towards the end, because it can totally vary. It's definitely not the same as coming out as gay or lesbian, pansexual, whatever. But it can also be problematic and challenging in its own way. That's totally different. But first, friends, if you are questioning, or if you were totally sure that you're demi, or you just want a little extra validation, or you're trying to like diagnose like a friend or family member or even partner in your life, here are 7 signs that you too are demisexual. Number 1, are you an INFJ in Myers-Briggs? Because I am, and I'm demisexual. And weirdly enough, every other INFJ I've ever met, which there have been a lot of them, I've had many like really good friends, including my best friend that are INFJs, many clients, and every INFJ I know is demisexual. If they don't even consciously know it, as soon as they learn what demisexuality is, they're like, yes, that's me, I'm demisexual. So yeah, there seems to be a correlation. And in fact, when I was doing like keyword research for this video, I saw that there's actually quite a few videos on YouTube about INFJs being demisexual, so that's something you might want to check out. So if you're an INFJ, just going to preface and say, there's like a 99.9% chance that you're demisexual. So sign number 2 is that dating and explicit sexual interest, or like pressure, or even romantic interest or romantic pressure, kind of makes you want to barf. Like, yeah, I feel most demisexuals like don't even want to touch dating apps with a hot poker. Like the whole idea, the whole concept of it is just so freaking cringe. And here's a tip. If you're into someone who is demisexual, or who you suspect is demisexual, kind of give them time to open up to you, because I can tell you, there's been some people in the past who I've gone on like dates with where like maybe they would have had a chance with me had they not like kind of pressured me to get like romantic and sexual with them. Basically, the moment they did that was the moment it shut off any potential for like romantic / sexual interest. Like immediately I feel repulsed when someone like comes on to me. And as such, I've kind of developed, it's kind of funny, I've become like a master at turning people down. It's like this running gag between me and my best friend when we're always out. Like I'm always getting like hit on and having people like come on to me, and I've learned to turn people down in pretty hilarious ways sometimes. And I can tell you, the people on the hand, right, that I said I could maybe consider myself being romantic or sexual with, all of those people were my friends who did not pressure me, even though some of them totally were into me, and I could sense that, I could feel it empathically that they were into me romantically and sexually. They never like pressured me to be in a relationship with them or to do anything sexual with them, to even go on explicit dates with them. And therefore I felt safe with them, and I was able to develop that emotional connection, which is definitely a prerequisite for a demisexual in order for them to be able to be sexual. So that leads us to our third sign, which is, have you ever just wished that you could just be friends with someone before dating? Like, I know me and some of my other demisexual friends would always just rant about this before we even knew that we were demisexual. We're like, oh, couldn't there just be a dating app for like friends with the potential of it turning into like romance? Because we're just so repulsed by the idea of going into a connection being like, yes, we're gonna hook up, like we're gonna get romantic, we're gonna date. We like the idea of just getting to know a person first and letting it kind of unfold naturally from there. And that being said, going off of that, like me, you may notice that if you've had like deep crushes on people in the past, if you felt like you could be sexual with someone or romantic with someone in the past, likely it was always with friends, people who you were able to know on a deep emotional level first. Sign number 4 is a fun one. So you've noticed that most of your crushes, or maybe all of your crushes, have been on fictional characters. This is actually a huge underrated sign for being demisexual in my experience. And it's one that, again, I think most demisexuals have experienced. And I will just pimp this video up here. There's like way more to fictional characters than perhaps you were led to believe. I did a video on fictional characters as spirit guides. So if you are the type that gets crushes on fictional characters, you may want to go validate yourself by watching the fictional character spirit guide video. That being said, why do demisexuals crush on fictional characters so much? It's really quite simple when I like step back and identified exactly why. So one is that they provide like a safe space for you to develop that emotional connection, that emotional bond. So it's like one-sided, right? With a fictional character, you're almost like observing them, but you don't have to worry about them observing you in return and like coming onto you and sexually or romantically pressuring you. So just like I said in the previous sign, when as soon as someone like comes onto me, it turns off any chance for romance or sexual connection. You don't have to worry about that with fictional characters. You can take as long as you want to like warm up to the character without worrying that they're going to like come back at you, right? So that's number one. And then number two, which is very important too, is that fictional characters, unlike say like celebrities, because I know a lot of people can have crushes on celebrities, but you don't really get to personally know celebrities, right? With fictional characters, you get to know them quite intimately, especially if it's like a video game and you get to like romance them in the video game, or you get to play as that character, or if it's a book and you get to like be in the characters' heads, you really get to know them at a very deep, emotional, intimate level. So that allows that attraction to kind of develop, which kind of gets stunted and cut off in the real world when people are just constantly kind of killing it by pushing sex or romance like too early for a demisexual person. So 5, I feel like whether you are sex repulsed or sex indifferent or even enjoy sex, as a demisexual person, it's very likely you would be totally cool just never having sex. It's just, you see it almost as just another life experience that you can choose to indulge in or not, you know, just like any sort of hobby. It's like, I don't see it as any different as just playing video games, shall we say, or reading tarot cards. It's like, you know, some people choose to play video games, some do not. Some read tarot, some do not. And I see sex the same way. I'm like, it's just an experience. I don't understand why people put it on like such a pedestal, because to me, it's just another experience and there's no like desire to have that particular experience. Of course, if I did, that's cool too. Like I'm cool either way. So 6, going off of that, either like yours truly, you are perpetually single. You just find that you cannot get in relationships because you don't have that connection to people. Or conversely, maybe you do get into relationships, and this is kind of what helped you figure out that you were demisexual, but it feels like you have to force yourself to be in relationships or force yourself to do like sexual stuff. It's very unnatural to you. And I just think of my own mother, actually, who, when I came out to my mother as demisexual, she just like looked shocked and she's like, wow, I think I might be demisexual too. And then when she told me more, she's like, she would drink like in high school and stuff before going out on dates or going to parties and being social and stuff, because it felt so unnatural and so like awkward. She had to like drink to kind of like numb herself to that, to be able to do those things that most of the other people were doing. So 7th and the final sign I'll address today is that looks don't matter to you probably at all. And by extension, maybe gender doesn't even matter to you, which is why I also think there might be a bit of a correlation between demisexuality and pansexuality, but not always. That is definitely not always the case. Remember, every demisexual is different. But again, I've noticed a clear correlation between demisexuality and pansexuality, because really for we demisexuals, like, we literally do not care about anything other than that emotional connection. It does not matter like what your gender identity is. It does not matter where you come from or what you look like. All we want to have is that emotional connection with you. That's it. So 5, what not to say to a demisexual person. This is a fun one. This might be a bit cathartic for me, actually, to share this. So number 1 is that everyone / all girls are like that. And this one is kind of specifically directed at girls, women, because that's what I am. And if you look at the studies, actually, there are more women who identify as demisexual than men. So it's more common. And a common thing that comes up for women when we come out as asexual or demisexual is that, aren't all women like that? Because women aren't as sexual as men and stuff like this, which is not true necessarily. Of course, there's always nuances, but I just had a story with this guy. This was a couple years ago. I was going on these dates with this guy, and I was very clear with him up front that I was asexual, that I was demisexual, that I like described to him what it was, and I made it very clear it's not guaranteed that I was going to develop a sexual attraction to him, and that it takes a lot of time for me to feel safe to even get to that point. And I was very upfront about all these things. And first he said, like, yeah, are all girls like that? And he started trying to compare me to like these other women in his life. And then second, throughout this like relationship, he would just kind of try and turn me into sex. Like, it was like he would like pressure me to do stuff a little too fast, and just, it was clear he didn't truly understand or hear my words when I was explaining what it means to be asexual and demisexual. And like, he wasn't happy with that arrangement, and I wasn't happy with that arrangement. So eventually, you know, we just went our separate ways. So the second thing you don't want to say to demisexual is that it's just your sexual trauma, or that you need to get some sort of professional help because you identify as asexual to some degree. This one was actually brought to me by a therapist. Actually, when I came out to this therapist that I was asexual, and that was something really vulnerable for me to even say at the time. And I was like in tears and just feeling so raw. And like, she like looked at me all concerned, and she's like, that's like not normal. She's like, there's clearly some serious sexual trauma there. You got to get help with that, Hannah. And it just made me feel terrible. It like completely invalidated me. It just reinforced the idea that I'm broken, that I'm messed up, that there's something to be fixed there. Now, I will say, a few years later, I feel like there was some truth in what she was saying, but I wouldn't say that. No, going through what I went through, I would never say that to someone that's just kind of coming out as demi or asexual to them and be like, yeah, you got to work on that. There's some sexual trauma there, because it's not necessarily always going to be the case. For me, it did turn out to be the case that there was some sexual trauma there, and there was something to be worked on. But that's not always the case. So don't be making assumptions about the person coming out to you and being vulnerable with you about their sexuality, that there's something like wrong with them, something that needs fixing, because there might not be. So number 3, and this one hurts. This one, I remember it was just like a slap in the face when it was spoken to me, is what a waste. When I told this dude that I was like not interested in any relationship, like, and that I was asexual, I was demisexual, he just looks at me like, what a waste. And I'm just like, whoa, dude, that is seriously disrespectful. Like, on one hand, I can understand where you're coming from, but on the other hand, there's so much that's problematic about that statement. I'm like, basically what you're saying to me is that, or what I'm hearing in any case, is that as a woman, as an attractive woman who is choosing not to be in a relationship and not to have sex, like, it's a waste. That's like my whole purpose, my whole reason for being. And if I'm not partaking in that side of myself, then I, as a human, am a waste. And as I said earlier, like, that's just so destructive for a demisexual person to hear, because for us, like, there's just so much more to life than sex and relationships. And to hear that, you know, like, our worth basically is intertwined with our ability or our desire to have a relationship, to be in a relationship, to have sex, it's just such a disrespect. It's such a diss, such a slap in the face. So please don't say any of those things to any person that's coming out to you. And I would just implore you, if someone is coming out as asexual or demisexual to you, please just listen to them and inquire and try to understand, even if it doesn't make sense to you. That's really all we want, is to be heard and understood instead of gaslit. That's probably the biggest issue with being asexual or demisexual, I would say, is that people in all communities, whether, you know, queer or straight or whatever, they're always like gaslighting our sexuality and kind of saying that it's in our heads, or that it doesn't exist, or that everyone's secretly like that, stuff like that. And in my experience, that's really just not the case at all. And even if it is the case, like, that's not very respectful to just diss someone and their way of life like that, you know? So all that being said, as a demisexual person, I feel like demisexuals, asexuals are here to embody and to show the collective that there is so much more to life than just sex. And I just want to say that I see you, my friends. I validate you and your sexuality, and you are powerful, you know? You are valid for being on this path and just being authentically you, even when it's been hard. So I'm sending you so much love, and like, dude, I'm getting like hyper emotional just speaking on it. So to changing the topic, let me know, are you demisexual or asexual? Do you identify with that? Do you know someone who might be demi or asexual? And finally, and this is the most important one I would like to know, would you like more content on this? Because like I said, I do suspect that there is a link between being a starseed and being on the asexual spectrum, just like there's a link between being a starseed and having autism. And maybe also then there's a link between having autism and being on the asexual spectrum as well. So if you would like to learn more about this, please just let me know any comments or any questions you have in the comments, and I'm happy to make more videos, even if it isn't Pride Day or Pride Month. As always, I appreciate you if you've stuck around to the end of this video. I really do appreciate you. You are awesome. If this video brought you any sort of value, if it resonated, please like the video, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and also engage with this video in some way, because all of these things help the algorithm along. It helps other demisexuals out there discover their sexuality and find that clarity, which can be so liberating. So me and the dragons and your fictional character crushes will love you forever if you can do this thing for us. But know that we will be loving you forever anyways. Sending you so much love on your journey, my friends, and stay powerful.